You hear the name Dodge, and what do you think of? American muscle, right? Power, dependability. But the real story behind that name, well, it's not about a giant corporation. It's about two brothers, John and Horace Dodge. These guys built an empire from scratch. They stared down a giant, and their incredible story was cut tragically short. This is how two brothers from a tiny town in Michigan took on the biggest name in the auto industry, and nearly won.
But here's the thing, before there was ever a Dodge car, the Dodge brothers were the secret weapon behind another legendary brand, Ford. We're not just talking about a few parts here and there, they were the master machinists who built pretty much everything for the first Ford cars. Engines, transmissions, axles, you name it. Honestly, without them, there probably wouldn't be a Model T, and the Ford Motor Company we know today, it might never have even gotten off the ground. But, being the secret weapon means you're stuck in the shadows, and that was a place they were not going to stay for long.
And that was the huge problem, right? Their success, their fortune, it was all tied to Henry Ford, a guy who was brilliant for sure, but also incredibly stubborn. They started as partners, but they were destined to become bitter rivals. Their whole career was really a fight to have their own name mean something. To really get who these guys were, you have to go all the way back to the beginning, in Niles, Michigan. Their story doesn't start in some fancy boardroom. It starts in a small, greasy machine shop. John and Horace, these two were inseparable. Their bond was forged in real hardship, and they had this incredible work ethic that would define their entire lives. This quote just says it all, doesn't it? It captures their characters so perfectly. This was never just about business for them. It was a bond built when they had absolutely nothing. They learned to rely on each other and just push forward no matter what. That kind of resilience, that became their trademark. And man, did they climb fast. They became master machinists, then jumped into the bicycle craze, inventing a game-changing ball bearing. They sold that business, packed up for Detroit, and opened a machine shop that very quickly got the reputation for being the absolute best in the city. That led to a massive contract with Oldsmobile, and suddenly, the Dodge brothers' name meant one thing: quality. And it was that reputation that brought a guy named Henry Ford knocking on their door in 1902. Now, you have to remember, this wasn't the Henry Ford we think of today. He was on his third try starting a car company and was mostly known for losing investors' money. So the brothers had this huge choice: stick with a safe, profitable Oldsmobile contract, or take a massive, massive gamble on a guy who, let's be honest, most people thought was a total bust. So this is where the story gets absolutely wild. They make the parts for Ford, and Ford can't pay his bills. He owes them thousands. Now, most people would have walked away, right? Sued him, maybe. But the Dodge brothers? They doubled down. They told Ford to forget the $7,000 he owed them. They gave him another $3,000 in cash, and in return, they demanded a 10% stake in his unproven company. Talk about a gamble. It was a total Hail Mary. And did it pay off? Oh, yeah. That initial $10,000 investment, which was mostly just debt they forgave, eventually made them $32 million from dividends and the final buyout. $32 million. They bet on Ford when no one else would, and it made them some of the richest men in America. But here's the thing about guys like the Dodge brothers. Money wasn't the whole story. They were brilliant engineers themselves, and they were constantly giving Ford advice on how to make his cars better. And Ford, he just arrogantly ignored them. The frustration just simmered and simmered until John Dodge finally blew up, delivering this famous line as he quit Ford's board: "They were done. Done building someone else's dream." And that was it. In 1914, they made their move. They cashed in on their reputation for quality. They launched the Dodge Brothers Motor Company. And with that, they weren't just starting a business. They were basically declaring war on their old partner, Henry Ford. The entire industry was just sitting back with popcorn, watching to see what would happen next. And look at how they came out swinging. Their first car, the Model 30, was a direct shot at Ford's famous Model T. And it wasn't just a little bit better. It was better in every single way that mattered. It had way more power, a tough all-metal body instead of wood and fabric, and modern features like an electric starter. No more breaking your arm with a hand crank. It was a true, legitimate upgrade. Horace Dodge had this killer quote that just summed up their entire marketing strategy perfectly. It's so clever. They weren't just selling a car, they were selling the next car. They knew that the huge market Ford had created would eventually want something tougher, more powerful, and just better. And they were positioning themselves to be the ones to sell it to them.
And you know what? It worked. It worked unbelievably well. In just a few years, the Dodge Brothers Motor Company shot up to become the second best-selling automaker in the entire United States. The only company selling more cars? You guessed it, Ford. The two former partners were now the two undisputed titans of the industry. Okay, so let's just pause for a second. It's the beginning of 1920. John and Horace Dodge are on top of the world. They've built up fortune from nothing, they've gone head-to-head with a rival and succeeded, and they've created a company that's famous for being tough as nails. They are at the absolute peak of their power. And then, in the blink of an eye, it all came crashing down. It all happened in one single awful year. In January of 1920, both brothers went to an auto show in New York and caught the flu. Horace slowly started to get better, but John's condition got worse, and he passed away. Less than a year later, Horace, who was completely devastated by the loss of his brother, his lifelong partner, also died. Within just 11 months, the two pillars of the entire company were gone. And this quote from Horace after John's death, man, it just breaks your heart, doesn't it? It shows you that this was never just a business. It was a partnership of two brothers who had started with nothing and built an empire, side by side. Without John, the heart of the whole enterprise was just broken. So what happens to an empire when its kings just vanish overnight? For the company they poured their entire lives into, the future was suddenly completely uncertain. And for the brothers themselves, their personal stories, their legacies, they just started to fade away. Well, the company's journey without them was frankly a mess. Their widows sold it to an investment bank for a staggering amount of money. But the new owners knew nothing about making cars. Sales just plummeted. A few years after that, it was sold again, this time becoming a key part of a new automotive giant, the Chrysler Corporation. And under Chrysler, the final step in their story kind of got erased. The company wasn't Dodge Brothers anymore. It was just Dodge. The name was still on the car, sure, but the incredible story of the two tough, brilliant guys from Niles who built it all from nothing, it just got swallowed up by corporate history. And that just leaves us with this huge, haunting what if. John and Horace Dodge weren't just competitors to Henry Ford. In so many ways, they were his equals, in their genius, their ambition, their grit. If tragedy hadn't struck them down at the absolute height of their power, you really have to wonder, would we be living in a world where the biggest name in American cars isn't Ford,